So welcome to our weekly Community Plus Values conversation. I am Ann Ayers, and I am the Dean of the Colorado Women's College. It's my great honor also to have been serving in a capacity as a lead on the Community Plus Values initiative. And as someone who is relatively new to DU, I've been here about 2.5 years. It's been just the most incredible experience to get to learn all of the corners of our campus, the experts that we have, and the care and the joy that happens on this campus. So today we're going to have a fantastic conversation. It is about having a healthy mind and a healthy body. And I'm thrilled to introduce you to some of our panelists. So we have Dr. Lotta Granholm-Bentley, who is the professor, she's a professor and also the founding executive director of the Knoebel Institute for Healthy Aging, has been working in healthy aging for 30 years. So I think you bring, I don't know, I think that you're going to know everything that we need to know, which is going to be fantastic. Also, you're from Sweden, so that's kind of a fun piece for me. I had an opportunity to live internationally, and I just always appreciate the experience and perspective that brings to a conversation. Dr. Daniel Linseman is also with us today. He is a Ph.D. in nutraceuticals, well, PhD, but has been studying nutraceuticals for about 15 years, and is a professor in our biology department. So thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Linseman. And then there's Lilia Koza, who is a PhD candidate for us in cellular and molecular biology, and is going to be doing the asking of the questions today. So in terms of format and just kind of where we are, I want to say what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop off screen. I'm going to hand it over to Lilia, who's going to ask some really tough questions. We're really going to put it to you today, all right? Ask some really tough questions. We have in the chat window, and then also in the Q&A, we will be monitoring for additional questions. And about 35 or 40 minutes into the hour, we are going to start to promote those questions, and I'll jump back in and help Lilia do that. So we would appreciate all of your questions as they happen along the way. Just start popping them into the chat. We'll start organizing them and looking for themes and doing that. It's always great to have the DU voices represented in these. I want to also apologize. We were not able to secure a captioner for today's video, which we just found out this morning. And so what we are going to do is make sure that when we post this video down, usually it posts within about 24 hours, we will have the captioning on that piece. So I have really appreciated a number of people, in particular, Rufina Hernandez has been such an advocate and helping us, not just advocating for folks who want it captioned, but helping us get the technology in line to do that. So I really apologize that that's not available today, but we are going to make it available down the road. So with that, Lilia, are you ready?
Sure,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump off screen, have a great conversation, and I'll just be listening.
Awesome. Thanks for the introductions too. So today we'll be doing some questions. So first one, what does healthy aging mean to you? And why should people of all ages, even younger individuals, care about healthy aging? So Dr. Granholm, why don't you go ahead and answer that first?
Thank you so much, Lilia, and good morning to everyone. I'm glad that you're here. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic medium to be able to meet everyone while still being at your house, I think. So to me, aging, I've been very interested in the aging process itself and what it means for a long time. And I would like to say everyone should be interested in aging because it starts at birth. It's something that we all have in common, actually, everyone ages. And what I have found out during this COVID isolation is what it's like to be isolated in your home, not be able to go out and not do what you want. So I would say to me, healthy aging would be independent, being able to do exactly what you want and go about your life, whatever your hobbies, whatever your interest, whatever your work is. To me, healthy aging is being able to do all of those things.
Hey, great, thanks. Dr. Linseman?
Sure, Lilia. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So I agree with that. I think healthy aging to me is being able to sustain and do the activities that you most enjoy, of course. And thinking about it, even adolescents and young adults should be thinking about aging to some extent because many of the effects that we see later in life are due to the decisions that we make when we're younger. So one thing that I dealt with was something called metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetes. And I didn't do all the things I should have done when I was younger. So this is like a syndrome of high glucose, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, high blood pressure. And if I had paid more attention, maybe when I was in college and in my younger years, in my 30s, maybe I wouldn't have diabetes today. So I think those are things that even younger people need to be concerned about. And then the last thing I'll say is that, you know, many of our young people out there are caregivers for older adults. And so, of course, they should be concerned about healthy aging and maybe helping their parents or grandparents age in a healthier manner.
Yeah, that's great advice from both of you. Yeah, even at my age, I do notice sometimes it's hard to think about getting older. So not always completely cognizant of that. So next question. So Dr. Granholm is the director of the Knoebel Institute for Healthy Aging, and Dr. Linseman is the associate director of the Institute as well. Dr. Granholm, can you tell us how the Knoebel Institute for Healthy Aging focuses on addressing the problems of aging, and what sorts of programs or research does the Institute promote?
Thank you, Lilia. That's a great question. We have been, it actually was started in 2010, and so it's been going this year for 10 years. And in 2016, we moved into our new space, and it's in the, as you know, it's in the top floor of the engineering building. And so we have the whole top floor. And we're excited because this allows us to work very closely with all the engineers in our building. And we're also working with 9 other colleges across campus. So what our purpose is to create interdisciplinary research groups that are focused on different topics related to aging. So it could be healthy aging, it's intergenerational programs, financial security, which Dr. Eric Chess is the director of, and then all of the basic science and translational science that goes on that is focused on Alzheimer's disease, ALS, Parkinson's disease. So it's really our job to make sure that people work together and that we can work with different clinics and make it better for everyone that is aging, not only in Colorado, but across the nation too.
Yeah, and being a grad student in the Institute, I can definitely speak to the fact that it is a very collaborative environment. You also do have the Tai Chi, right, on Fridays, or maybe not currently with the situation, but yeah, lots of great programs at the Institute.
So let me, I could chime in and say, yeah, we have had Tai Chi. We thought for a while of having virtual Tai Chi, and we're thinking about if this isolation continues, we will definitely have it. But we also have mindfulness programs. So we have a mindfulness program that is starting in early June. And if you're interested in that, it's very easy to reach us. It's aging@du.edu, so that you can sign up for different classes that we do.
Great, thanks. So an unfortunate part of aging is the risk of developing neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer's disease. Could you tell us about important findings from your research relating to aging and neurodegenerative disease? How about Dr. Linseman, you go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been studying for a number of years is the role of oxidative stress, particularly in the aging brain as it relates to diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And many studies have supported this idea that as we age, our antioxidant reserve gets diminished. So key essential antioxidants like glutathione is one good example, get depleted in the body, but also in the brain as we age. And those antioxidants are really important for scavenging free radicals, diminishing inflammation, and protecting, in the case of the brain, the nerve cells from damage. And of course, oxidative stress has been implicated in diseases like Alzheimer's disease. So one of the areas that my lab works on, and Lily is familiar with this, is our nutraceuticals or nutritional supplements. Nutraceuticals themselves are bioactive compounds found in foods. And then there are also nutritional supplements, which could include things like vitamins, whey proteins, fish oil, these types of things. So one of the nutritional supplements that I've worked on extensively is a whey protein supplement called Immunocal. It's made by a biotech company, Immunotech, that's actually in Quebec, Canada. And a number of years ago, they contacted me and asked if I would look at it in some mouse models of neurodegeneration. And so over the last couple of years, we've looked extensively in a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease. And basically these mice, they develop similar pathology and similar cognitive deficits to patients with Alzheimer's disease. They do so at between 6 months and 12 months of age. Mice typically live about 2 to 3 years. So what we did is when the animals were 3 months old, we put them on either a normal diet or a diet that was supplemented with this Immunocal, this whey protein. The unique thing about this whey protein is that in multiple studies, it's been shown to boost levels of the key antioxidant glutathione. And then what we did is at different times, 6 months and 12 months of age, we looked at the animals in terms of their cognitive function as well as histology and biochemistry in their brains. And we found some really remarkable things. Number one, as the animals aged and developed Alzheimer's, the glutathione levels in their brain did decrease substantially, and the supplementation with Immunocal prevented that. Now, one of the consequences of Alzheimer's disease is the formation of amyloid plaques, these senile plaques that form in the brain. And that's thought to be an index of potential amyloid toxicity in the brain. And what we found remarkably was that the animals that were given the Immunocal had about a 70% reduction in the amyloid plaque load in the brain. So just by giving this so-called glutathione precursor, something that boosts glutathione levels, we were able to really decrease the Alzheimer's pathology in the brain of these mice. We saw some additional things too. We saw there's a protein in Alzheimer's that plays a key role in a process called synaptic plasticity in the hippocampus. This protein is called reelin. And reelin is important basically for learning and development of memories in the hippocampus. In Alzheimer's disease, actually early in Alzheimer's disease, reelin is depleted in the hippocampus. But remarkably, the animals that we gave this Immunocal to, that preserved the reelin expression in the hippocampus. So really pretty tremendous findings, I think, for a nutritional supplement, a simple whey protein. That's primary mechanism of action, we think, is to boost glutathione. And it had these far-ranging positive effects in this mouse model of Alzheimer's disease. So we've presented this work at a couple of national conferences and are in the process of submitting that for publication.
Great, thanks. Yeah, as being a grad student too in the lab, I can speak to those findings, and we're also looking at a few other compounds, like compounds found in blackberries, and some other compounds that are found in fruits and other foods that you eat every day. So a lot of great research going on at the Institute. Dr. Granholm, do you have anything to say about this, or you think Dr. Linseman covered that?
I think you covered it really well, but I would also like to say that we have Dr. Linseman and other people in the Institute have strong connections with clinics because, as most of you know, DU doesn't have a medical school. And so how we can reach our people out in the community is through places like Illuma and Resilience Code and other places that treat older adults with different kinds of neurodegenerative disease.
Great, thanks. So another unfortunate part of aging is an increased susceptibility to infection and illness. Kind of relating to today's recent events, why do individuals over the age of 80 fare so much worse when infected with COVID-19? And are there some lifestyle factors or supplements that may lower this risk of contracting COVID-19? Dr. Granholm, how about you go ahead and answer that?
This is a very important and interesting topic. As probably all of you do, I follow the news all day, every day, and I try to make sense of all of the data that comes out for our state and other states. And in fact, Lilia and also Dr. Linseman are part of a study that we're trying to do together with the clinic, looking at new antibody tests for COVID-19. But why do people who are older, why are they at a higher risk for COVID? We think that it's because older people have many more chronic diseases or chronic conditions than younger people do. So for example, more people have diabetes, they may have asthma, they have, for example, Alzheimer's disease. People are very, very sensitive because they have already sort of a chronic inflammatory type of condition, not only in the brain, but also in the bloodstream. And also what's interesting to me, and I'd really like to do a study on, is that many older people have a deficiency in vitamin D. Vitamin D you can actually get by simply going out in the sunshine. And when the sun hits the skin, the cholesterol sort of reacts with the rays and forms vitamin D. And it turns out, when I lived in South Carolina, we actually did a study on older adults in South Carolina. And even though they're in a very sunny state and they should have normal levels of vitamin D, they don't. And so people recommend that, you know, if someone has a vitamin D deficiency, to take, you know, maybe 4,000 IU or so a day. And the normal pill supplement of vitamin D is about 1,000. So I started taking 2,000 a day, actually, vitamin D, and I'm outside a lot. And I think the lifestyle of walking or being outside or gardening itself actually lowers the stress and lowers the risk for infection. And then especially I would keep an eye on vitamin D because nobody has really talked about it, even though they've said that we should drink Lysol. Nobody has said be outside and enjoy the sunshine. So I'm not going to become politically incorrect here.
Great.
It's important with the lifestyle factors, such as you normally would do to stay healthy. Those become even more important. And now when people are isolated, confined to their homes, just trying to go outside, you can go across the street if you meet someone, and trying to exercise is very important.
Great, thanks, Dr. Granholm. I think that kind of leads us nicely into our next question. So would you recommend taking any other supplements or vitamins to promote healthy aging? And if so, which ones? And can you tell us about some research that supports their use? So why don't Dr. Linseman, you go ahead and answer that one.
Yes, I think, you know, following up on what Lotta said, I think obviously a multivitamin, you know, that has vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin C, which are, you know, key antioxidants. That would be obviously something that everybody could pretty much take. I take a multivitamin I just recently switched to the over 50 one, you know, so that was kind of a heartbreaking thing. But I also would recommend some type of omega-3 supplement, either fish oil or krill oil. Sometimes the fish oil pills are so huge, I know they can be kind of difficult to swallow. There are actually some newer omega-3s that are krill oil, and they actually are tiny. There's one called, I think, Mega Red or something like that. They're much easier to swallow. But the fish oil, the omega-3s are really important antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compounds. There's a large number of studies, particularly related to heart disease, focused on omega-3 supplementation. Also, omega-3s have been shown to protect the brain in different types of stress and trauma, including things like concussions. So I would think that omega-3s are a pretty good, pretty safe, good supplement as well. I personally recommend Immunocal, which, as I mentioned, is a glutathione precursor. It's a whey protein. It has several benefits. Number one, as I said, it boosts this key antioxidant. We've also shown that it has anti-inflammatory activity. It decreases inflammation in the brain under certain circumstances. The other thing that it does, like most whey proteins, is that it benefits you in terms of skeletal muscle strength and performance. So there have been some studies done by Immunotech in frail elderly patients as well as healthy elderly patients. And both studies have shown benefit of taking this whey protein supplement in terms of exercise performance and muscle function. So I think the goal of a lot of these other supplements would be to decrease inflammation and increase your antioxidant reserve, which will be important factors in combating aging, as inflammation and free radicals are key players in the aging process.
Kind of a off the grid question, I suppose. Can you recommend any sort of, I guess, brands that are good vitamins or supplements? Because I do know some that include some preservatives and maybe things that you want to be taking along with the supplements.
Trying to think of the one that I take is it's Nature's Recipe or something, but I don't know that there's a specific one. I guess I would avoid ones that are not probably brand name supplements. The problem with some supplements, you have to understand, nutritional supplements are multi-billion-dollar a year businesses, right? That's a huge business, nutritional supplements. And there are a lot of supplements available online that aren't from very reputable places. We kind of call them snake oil. You have to be careful because some of those will have, as you said, they'll have these fillers and things. Some can even have heavy metals and stuff in them. So I think you want to go, for the most part, with the brand names that are out there, the ones that are established. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but that would be a good starting point.
Great, thanks.
I can add a little bit to that too. So we did a study in Sweden on omega-3s, and it's difficult to get an active form of omega-3 in a pill form. But if you eat salmon, they've done studies in Sweden showing that people who eat salmon 3 times a week or more actually have a longer lifespan. And so it affects everything. And I would add to Dr. Linseman's comments there also that I take a green mussel extract from New Zealand. It's a company that they have, of course, a lot of green mussels come from New Zealand, and they have an extract that I take, and I give to my elderly dog also. And it affects, it's very good for joint health.
Can't say I've had green mussels, but I have to look into that one. Thanks, both of you. So we've kind of talked about supplements. So how about what impact does exercise and physical activity have on aging? Does beginning an exercise program later in life still provide benefits? And Dr. Granholm, if you can speak a little bit to that, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have done several studies at the Knoebel Institute. For example, Dr. Aurélie Ledreux, she has done a lot of studies in terms of exercise in older adults. And the studies clearly show that simply just a half an hour of a moderate exercise, such as walking on a stepmaster or going out with your dog or so on, actually increases very significantly some proteins in the brain that are beneficial for brain health. These are called, for example, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, or BDNF. And so she showed in a study that if you only walk for half an hour, you could increase your BDNF levels with 30%. And then if you kept that up for 5 weeks, you could actually keep a steady higher level of BDNF. And what BDNF does is actually reduce cell death in the brain and promote growth of new nerve cells. So it's not just maintaining what you have, it's actually improving new nerve cells in a particular part of the brain. And I would like to actually refer to something called the blue zones. I know Lilia has heard about the blue zones. I don't know, for those of you who have not, there's a website, I think it's called the bluezones.com, and blue zones are places in the world where people live extra long. So they become what we call centenarians, which are people over 100. And there's, for example, one in California, one place in California, Sardinia, Costa Rica, Greece, and then of course the best one of all is Okinawa, which is an island part of Japan. And there, what they show there in these different places is that if people maintain exercise as part of their daily life, first, I can give an example from Sweden. Sweden is number 8 in the world in terms of longevity. And the US is number 50 or so of longevity in the world. So even though we put more money than any other country on drug development and on healthcare and so forth, we don't do better than, there are 49 other countries that do better than we do. And in Sweden, what people do is that they don't drive their kids to school, the kids bike or walk, and people don't take the car to go to work, they walk, and they walk to the store and they walk or bike different places. So what the blue zones actually teach us, and if you're interested, I would go on there if I were you and look at there are 9 rules that the researchers who study the blue zones have come up with. And one of them is actually moving naturally. And so it's not taking the bike in your car and go to the park, it's actually biking to the park. Because that reduces the stress if you make it part of your daily life. And so exercise is very beneficial, but especially for if you build it into your daily life. For example, we have a dog, we walk him. He is very exhausted because we try to walk him 5 times a day, and he looks at me, I don't want to walk with you anymore. We've walked 4 times today, stop it. And so that kind of natural building of exercise is even more important because it relieves stress, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, and exercise can be pretty unpleasant. So if you work it into your daily routine, maybe it's not as tough to get done as well. So I guess kind of tying, the body and the mind together, I guess how does taking care of ourselves physically also help the aging brain? And Dr. Linseman, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Well, I think Lotta really touched on this too, is that, in terms of exercise, certainly an exercise regimen can boost these important trophic factors, things like BDNF that are protective in the brain. There's a large number of studies, I believe, out there showing that a solid exercise routine decreases inflammation. And also, of course, the decrease in stress that Lotta mentioned, decreasing cortisol levels, I think is important, and decreasing that stress level. One other thing that I kind of wanted to bring in here, just is kind of a more holistic approach to aging. We can discuss this a little bit, is this interaction that we have with this dementia clinic. It's called the Illuma Institute here in town. It's run by neurologist Adam Wolf. We're collaborating with them. They have a unique sort of holistic approach to treating dementia, specifically in aging. So they're using a combined approach of some physical therapy, cognitive therapy, music therapy, art therapy, socialization, and then a specific diet called the Mind Diet, which is high in antioxidants and vegetables and different lean meats and that sort of thing. So kind of a low fat, low carbohydrate, high protein diet. It's partially based on the Mediterranean diet as well. So I think these kind of holistic approaches, if you think about it, are very important for maintaining brain health. It's not simply a matter of diet. Diet is extremely important. Exercise is important. But I think other aspects, sort of training your brain, you know, the old saying that you either use it or lose it, right? If you don't use your brain, I think you can start to have deficits. And so I think that's really important that, you know, you take advantage of all those options that are out there to keep not just an active body, but an active brain.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I do believe it does all tie together. And that kind of leads us to our next question. Do hobbies and leisure activities have any impact on aging? If so, what activities are most beneficial to the aging brain? So Dr. Granholm, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. So I've studied this quite a bit, actually, both with animal studies and in humans. And I've read a lot about it just to try to understand what are the best practices. And the blue zones, again, can teach us a lot because people on Okinawa, for example, who many of them live way beyond 100, what they do is that they garden and they fish. So they collect vegetables that they've grown themselves. And I don't know if you guys have been doing this, but I'm very interested in gardening. And I've had a lot more time this year than any other year. I'm growing my own tomatoes and peppers and herbs and so on. So it's a satisfaction, not just when you eat the tomato, but it's months ahead of anticipation. And you know, you have a little plant. I planted seeds of tomatoes. I had them in my window, and now they're out in the garden. And it's that kind of anticipation is very needed. So anything that people do, I also believe in puzzles, for example. I have right now a 1,000-piece puzzle I'm working on. And all of that really relates to looking forward. So the most important trait that they found in common to all of the blue zones was optimism. And it's very difficult to train and teach optimism, but there are actually people, I know at UCSD in San Diego, that there is, in San Diego, there's actually classes for older adults in training themselves to be optimistic. My mother, who's 92, is waiting for her second hip replacement. She's in an assisted living home, and yet, every time I talk to her, she has no visitors, no way of getting out, but she's very optimistic. She says that, you know, when my hip has been replaced, I'm going to come to visit you. We're going to go to the Botanic Gardens. We're going to do all these things. So what the hobbies do and the things that give pleasure to us, it actually allows us to plan, to think ahead. And that kind of optimism is extremely important, I think.
Great, thanks. Sounds like there is some truth to, you know, mind over matter. Okay, so I think last question here, just kind of a summary of everything we've talked about. Could you summarize and tell us what changes we could make today to start on the path to aging healthier? So Dr. Linseman, why don't you go ahead and start us off first?
So I have a little list here. So I guess you could start out by increasing sort of these antioxidant and anti-inflammatory nutraceuticals in your diet. And so some of the things that you could think about, these are things that I've worked on over the last, 15 years, would be lots of different berries. So berries have polyphenols in them, which are very good antioxidants, anti-inflammatory agents. Things like green tea, which have catechins, which are also antioxidants. Coffee has caffeic acid, which is another polyphenol antioxidant. Certain herbs, so for example, turmeric is a spice that has curcumin in it, which is an important antioxidant. Rosemary and parsley and sage, they all have rosmarinic and carnosic acids, which are polyphenolic antioxidants. Can also add in things like dark chocolate. So dark chocolate or cocoa has a large group of compounds called procyanidins, which are polyphenols again. Also, things like red wine. Red wine has tannins in it, which are important antioxidants. In relation to red wine, I could mention the French paradox. Some of you are probably familiar with that. So the French, unfortunately, have one of the worst diets on the planet. They eat tons of cheese and fatty foods and that, but they have one of the lowest incidences of cardiovascular disease. And that French paradox is thought to be due to their consumption, heavy consumption at times of red wine. And that red wine, those tannins in the wine counteract all of those fats. So, you know, my thing is, if you're going to eat a lot of cheese and a lot of dark chocolate, supplement it with a couple glasses of red wine, you should be good to go. Okay. And then I think also, obviously, we talked a little bit about a solid exercise regimen. I mean, I walk my dog 6 days a week, not 5 times a day, but 6 days a week. She's loving it, me being home, because she gets walked even more. And then I think also, as I mentioned, some of these brain activities. So get involved in music or art or some sort of cognitive games. You know, one of my favorites is Tetris, which some of you might be familiar with, or Hexic. These are games where on a video screen these shapes fall and you have to put them in order so that you build up these walls. They're fun games. These cognitive games can be very helpful to help keep your brain active.
Great, thanks. I think the wine and cheese was probably the best advice we've heard. Dr. Granholm, if you'd also have something to add.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I really think optimism is so important, but it's very difficult to be optimistic in these days. And so I would say that it's important to try to adapt to the new normal, where we're dealing with this right now at the Knoebel Institute, where 10 people at a time can only be in our space. But try to reach out to people. We've tried to do, for example, some happy hours where everyone gets on Zoom and has a glass of wine together and talks about how the week was and what we did. That's very important, because focusing on the glass being half full instead of half empty is going to be so important in these days. But if you feel empty, if you feel lonely, if you feel that you don't know who to reach out to, there always are people, there are helplines and so on that you can reach and talk to. And I've noticed, for example, my neighbors that I never talked to before, that we now talk at length every time we meet them, and going in and out of the house, we stop and we talk and we have a conversation just about weather or anything. And so we actually have somebody new to talk to. And again, if you want to reach out, if you have questions, you can go to aging@du.edu, and you can always reach us and ask us about these different things.
Okay, great. Thank you both for sharing your knowledge and advice. I'm going to pass it over to Anne so she can help us with the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have committed Chase and Abby and I to going back and listening to this video and capturing these recommendations and making sure that we're posting a list of them as well, because we've had a lot of questions. I've even had my phone blowing up with people asking questions. So clearly we want to capture this. So I want to, Dr. Granholm, I want to ask you about optimism in the context of where we are today in COVID, right? I think that this can be a really terrifying situation for people, especially who are in vulnerable populations because of a health condition or because of age. How do you maintain optimism right now? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, I absolutely do. I think about it every day, all day. And what we do is that we focus on the good news that actually are sifting through between the evil news or the bad news or the false news. We got a piece of news, for example, yesterday that said that, in fact, the contagion cannot happen through surfaces. So my husband and I immediately said to each other, that means that we can actually accept more packages We don't have to Lysol spray them. Parents can take their kids to the playground. They can go in the slide, even if they have to be at 6 foot difference. It makes a huge difference. And I actually also, because I'm from Sweden, I see a lot of the sort of bad rep that Sweden has gotten. But because, so what you read in the news about Sweden being evil for staying open and so many deaths and so on, actually, if you read between the lines, it's not true. Because I have, one sister who has end-stage glioblastoma or brain tumors, lives in Sweden, and my mother, that both of them are treated extremely well. They're getting all the care they need. But at the same time, people around them who have younger kids, the kids can still go to school, the parents can go to work, but everyone who is older, an older adult or sensitive or vulnerable, can actually stay at home and isolate. So maybe it's a better model, and it's something that seems to actually be working there. And maybe what they've been able to do is build immunity. And so instead of feeling an enormous fear, I feel optimistic about that. If we start, Colorado has started very lightly opening up, and maybe that slow opening will create some immunity. I think that's what we need. Right now, we need a little bit more immunity. So next time the disease comes around, more people are actually protected. We built up, the hopes is we could have a 60% immunity the next time the disease comes along.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Lilia, there's a question for you. We always have a selection of students and a variety of ages here. So there's a question that's come through. So for folks who are in their 20s and 30s, what sort of recommendations do you have, kind of based on your studies and just your own experience and your peer set, about ways that you're taking care of yourself and sort of how you get motivated to take care of yourself?
Sure. So I do work in a lab that does focus on nutraceuticals. So diet is something that, I basically study, so it's something that is important to me, just realizing that, what I put in my body does affect how I feel the day of, the next day, and does affect even, how I think. And being in a grad program, I do have to think quite a bit. So diet does affect, that kind of brain function as well. And also being in a grad program too is stressful. So I do use exercise as a way to kind of de-stress, like Dr. Granholm was saying. Definitely releases endorphins and helps me sleep better at night, helps me get to sleep quicker. So yeah, again, it's hard to think, of aging and that you're getting older as a younger individual. But, we all have grandparents, we all have parents. We do think that we do see them getting older, and they can also give advice as to how to take care of yourself as you're younger. So it is a real thing, aging. So, but yeah, I'd just say good advice is just to do what makes you feel well. So healthy diet, exercise, and yeah, I guess that.
Well, part of what I hear in your answer is slowing down enough to actually know what makes you feel well, so that you're not, because I think, so many of us go so fast that you eat something, you might not even pay attention to the fact that it's not making you feel well, kind of connecting those dots. So it's a good reminder for me to think about that. Dr. Linseman, I have another question we have a question that's come through about the virtues of supplements versus real food and kind of using those to get your nutrients. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. One thing I should say is that the grad students also see their professors getting older all the time. That happens every day. They may or may not contribute to the aging process of the professors. We'll see about that.
And wiser, right?
See the other way around too.
That's true. Yeah, so I think there's a virtue in both supplements and dietary things. So, of course, nutraceuticals and food are fantastic, and I highly recommend supplementing your diet with some of these things that I mentioned before. I left out walnuts. Walnuts are really good. They have another key antioxidant. Should also probably mention dragon fruit. The red dragon fruit, if you can get a hold of it at Sprouts or Whole Foods, that has really excellent antioxidants, as well as kiwi. Kiwi does also. So to mention that, but the supplements, you have to understand that sometimes we can't eat enough of a particular food to get a high enough concentration of that particular supplement that we might be looking for. So you can drink tons of orange juice, but not get as much vitamin C as you can take in a multivitamin, right? Mm-hmm. So that's I think to some extent that's true. I like what Lotta said though about salmon as opposed to necessarily an omega-3. Again, I think that's a good thing. But if you don't like eating fish, then you might take the supplement, right? So some of these things are purely choice, and some have to do with the absolute amount of that compound that we can get in our system.
All right. Dr. Granholm, do you have anything to add on that front?
No, not really. It's sometimes very difficult to get hold of. I completely agree with Dr. Linseman. If I were to eat green mussels every day, it would be a couple of pounds of green mussels every day. And so some things aren't possible to do. And when we think about aging, we should also think about, I forgot to mention this, our pets. Our pets are also holed up inside. Our pets may not be able to get to hold of the same variety of diet that we normally have. And so we need to think about, especially as our pets get older, if we want to keep them longer, we need to keep them trim. And we used a diet called Fit and Trim, for example, for our labs. And our labs lasted until they were 60.
Wow.
So I just want to add that, yeah, I give my dog takes the green mussel extract. He's 12 and he's looking fabulous and moving fabulous. So let's think about our pets also in terms of healthy aging.
Since you bring that up, I'm curious, do you buy supplements that are specific to pets, like at a pet store? Are you buying, where are you sourcing those?
Yeah, I'm actually getting online the green mussel extract. I'm getting it from New Zealand. The same company has green mussel extract for humans and then for pets as well. So you can get all of that online. And in fact, we tried glucosamine, for example, before me and my husband went on it ourselves. We tried it on our elderly lab and it worked in him. And so we thought there must be something to this. And we started taking it too. And then we felt better because sometimes studies in animals like pets actually can show you because they don't have a bias. They don't really care what they eat. And so you can actually see the real true effects coming out if you do this kind of studies.
Yeah, my dog does have a bias. We've been trying to give him new things. He's about 8 months old, and he takes whatever it is, chicken, he takes it out of his bowl and puts it over to the side, and he won't eat anything other than his dog food. So I'm still working on that piece. Maybe I'll have to find somebody who specializes in pet behavioral, psychology or something. So we've talked a little bit about sweets and sugars along the way, some wines, some chocolate. How do you, can you talk to us about how those do affect the brain, how they might affect, your thinking, your reactions, and then how do we moderate those in a way? And who would like to jump in?
I can start and then I can give the word over to Dr. Linseman. So for a while, about 10 years or so, people have thought about actually calling Alzheimer's disease diabetes type 3. Because there's such a strong connection between Alzheimer's disease and diabetes. And most of all, it's people who are unable to moderate their glucose levels in blood with using insulin and so on. The more difficult cases that are not able to regulate so easily. And there we have seen a very strong connection. We don't know exactly how that works, but we think that actually the sugars, sort of extra glucose or sugars in the brain might actually impact the amyloid, the plaques that are forming and make those worse. So that's one way that can happen. And essentially what we say in terms of Alzheimer is that every systemic chronic disease affects the brain. And so if you improve your cholesterol levels, if you improve your diabetes and regulate it, and anything that cardiovascular conditions, that will actually improve the condition in the brain. Same thing for the sugar intake.
Great. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would just kind of mention, just following up on that, that hyperglycemia, so consistently high blood glucose, has deleterious effects on the heart, the kidneys, and the brain. A lot of that has to do with accelerating inflammation. And so, for those of us who do have diabetes, it's really important to try to control that sugar. Get your glucose levels down in that safe zone so that you don't have these effects later in life that could be dementia related or heart disease related. Obviously kidney function. We all know about issues with the eyes as well as neuropathies. So there's a lot of things there, and that's why I mentioned too. I didn't learn when I was younger. When I was in my 30s and that, I just kept, I go to the doctor once every couple of years. They'd say, "Oh, you're pre-diabetic. You have metabolic syndrome." Oh, okay, yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that later. And then one day I went in there and they said, "Well, now you have diabetes." So I decided to start taking care of it. Well, guess what? Once you have diabetes, it's harder, because once you've made that conversion from pre-diabetic to diabetic, your body works against you in a lot of ways. You become insulin resistant, and it's very difficult to get your glucose controlled. And that's really important. So I do emphasize to younger people, we tend to be in the US kind of a sedentary society. And I think Lotta also mentioned that. And so it's really important to watch those things and to make those adjustments early, before you get kind of caught in that trap of diabetes.
Yeah. I want to just say that I'm so appreciative of you sharing that part of your personal story, and Dr. Granholm too, just hearing. It's really nice, I think, when we hear leaders like yourselves who humanize this and make it real. So thank you so much for that. Sometimes when I'm scrolling through, like on a news feed or a CNN, I'll see something that'll say, 10 doctors have said, eliminate this from your diet immediately, and it'll show a picture of something I don't recognize, usually a fruit or something. And so, but if you had a no list, or really watch it, what might be on those lists? Yes.
I can start. Yeah, we did a study in rats on trans fats, or hydrogenated fats, which are those fats that have been generated by the food industry since the Second World War. And these trans fats, many countries, for example, many states, New York, for example, eliminated trans fats from diet. So New York started, the Southerns, by then I was actually living in South Carolina, and we did a study on a particular trans fat in our rats, and we were able to show that I think it was only 8% of the diet of this trans fat for 8 weeks. And then we tested the rats in a memory test, and they could never even figure out sort of the compounds on the test. They never learned how to do this, never did the test.
Right.
And it was highly publicized, and we went to a conference, there was a press conference about it, and I started receiving threatening phone calls from the fat industry, saying that this is not at all what happens with trans fats. They're not at all bad, and blah, blah, blah. And so I would say absolutely no. And even if you think you buy something and it says 0 trans fats on the label, it could still have if it has less than 0.5% of trans fats. That's still, the problem with trans fats is that they are made, artificially. So your body is unable to metabolize them. So if you go to McDonald's and eat a burger, for example, or French fries, you're unable, it's artificial fat, and you're unable to metabolize them. So your body can't use that. And so in half an hour again, you're hungry again. And you're going to eat another fast food. So fast foods that contain trans fats are absolutely deadly for you, because you can't benefit. I would even say that cream and butter and those, the real kind of fats, are actually much better than the trans fats are. So that's a no.
That's a no-no. All right. Dr. Linseman, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, this is a common refrain that you'll hear, but carbs are evil, okay? you want to maintain a low carbohydrate diet if possible. That being said, I do think you can be selective in how you take in your carbs, because we all take in some carbs, right? And
Right.
so if your carbs are a glass of red wine and a piece of dark chocolate, you're doing okay. Okay, but what you shouldn't be doing, and we're all guilty of this sometime, but is every morning you have your, full fat Starbucks mocha with, a big blueberry muffin or a donut. That's a lot of carbs. That's basically your daily carb intake right there, So if at lunch you eat a sandwich, you just added on, a bunch more carbs with the bread. If at dinner you have spaghetti, there you go. You've just had a gigantic carb load all day.
Right.
And that's just not good. I mean, so for me, I think having diabetes, that's something that I have learned. I grew up in Michigan. I don't know if you guys know anything about the Midwest, but we make sandwiches out of everything, right? I used to eat sandwiches, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now I have maybe a sandwich every couple of days because I just can't eat all the bread.
Right.
And, I'm Italian. I used to eat pasta all the time. My mom makes homemade pasta. And now I can't eat it. I just eat the meatballs. So, it's big changes. Those are big changes, but it's important.
Yeah.
I could add to that. What's interesting to me is actually the amount of food. So what's interesting is, if you start looking at demographics, it's quite interesting. I don't know if you know this, but the average caloric intake in the US is 3,500 calories a day. 3,500. And we're supposed to eat less than 2,000. That's the average. And so if you actually look at dinner plates, if you go in Europe, for example, if you go out for dinner, you can't do it right now, but later on, and you get your main plate, you're looking at it and you're thinking, is this an appetizer? Because the plate is actually smaller. And
Right.
Every serving is so much smaller. And if we could only get down to less than 2,000 calories a day, including carbs, including hydrogenated fats and everything, too much of everything.
Right.
We would be much better as a country. We would have a lifespan that would be more like the other Western countries.
That would be great. We have literally 1 minute left. I want to just throw in this this question that came across. How important is it to get a high heart rate when you're doing this exercise? Just one quick answer. Who wants to jump in? Dr. Linseman? Or Dr. Granholm?
I just want to say that moderate exercise is important. It doesn't have to be very excessive exercise. So walking a dog is as good as being on a, working out a huge sweat. But that's my opinion. But Dr. Linseman, what do you say?
No, I think that's right. I think there's been a lot of studies that have shown that even moderate exercise, like walking, particularly if you do it almost every day, I think that can be just as beneficial for your long-term health as doing real rigorous workouts. I will mention too, it's good if you can to incorporate some strength training as well. Because strength training, in addition to doing the aerobic type of training like walking, strength training helps improve, for example, insulin sensitivity of your tissues.
Right.
So one of the things that lowers my blood sugar is when I lift weights. So I know for a fact that weight training is key. It doesn't have to be a super rigorous, you're not trying to be a bodybuilder necessarily. It's just doing some strength training to maintain your lean muscle mass.
Yeah. Thank you so much, all of you. We have one other question that popped up, but we will try to make sure that we respond to that by email, which is around how does stress affect the brain, and I think that's really pertinent today. But I want to keep our commitment to people's time. It is noon. We're going to let everyone go. I just want to thank you so much for your work that you're doing. I think it's really important, and I discovered the Knoebel Institute about a year into being here, and was just thrilled. And I'm on your website and kind of looking at things here and there. So I would encourage everybody to really leverage this incredible resource that we have. And Lilia, thank you for the questions that you developed and asking them. And I'm so glad that we have people who are going to be coming along and advancing the thinking. So thank you so much for your time. To the folks in IT, to the folks on the C+V team, thank you as well for all that you're dedicating. This is a tough time for everybody, and so coming together in community around important topics, especially about how we're taking care of ourselves, is just terrific. So thank you so much for all your time, everybody, and we'll post this on Tuesday along with some recommendations. Thanks.